What the early 2026 teasers for Beyond the Gates suggest is not simply that Fairmont Crest is headed for more drama, but that the first 4 months of 2026 may be structured like a slow, relentless pressure test for the community, one that forces the residents to confront the difference between image and endurance, between love as a slogan and love as an everyday discipline. In a recent interview with TV Insider, Michele Val Jean, the show's creator and head writer, laid out a set of story promises that point to a very specific kind of intensity. Not the flashbang kind that burns hot and disappears, but the kind that lingers, reshapes relationships, and leaves consequences on the body and the heart. Fairmont Crest has always thrived on the tension of polished exteriors, wealth, influence, curated respectability, but the coming beats hint that the show is ready to make those exteriors crack in ways that are deeply human and, at times, uncomfortable. That matters because it reframes the stakes. It is no longer only about who wins the latest social battle, who keeps the upper hand in a family dispute, or who controls the narrative at the next gathering. It is about survival, truth, and the cost of silence, especially when silence is chosen as a form of control or self-protection. The storylines teased do not need to invent chaos. They only need to follow through on what illness, fear, and secrecy do when they move into a household that has spent years perfecting the art of appearing unbreakable. The most emotionally grounded of these arcs is the recovery journey of Anita, Dupree, a plotline confirmed to end in survival, yet written to refuse the easy comfort of a simple "she gets better, and everything goes back to normal." Val Jean has made it clear that Anita's breast cancer recovery will be depicted as hard, painful, and real, focusing on what a survivor actually endures on the road to becoming the winner. That framing is crucial because it places the drama in the daily grind rather than in a single climactic moment, the exhaustion that arrives without warning, the nerve-deep aches that make even a quiet morning feel like a mountain, the sense of betrayal when the body refuses to cooperate with the mind's determination, the private panic that can flare up at night when the household is finally silent. In a place like Fairmont Crest, where strength is often treated as a performance and vulnerability can be weaponized, Anita's reality becomes more than a medical battle. It becomes a social and emotional collision with the identity she has been expected to embody. The treatment process does not just test her stamina, it tests her relationship to control, because illness is the ultimate thief of predictability. Even when the outcome is hopeful, the path is not neat. There will be days when Anita feels proud of herself for enduring one more appointment, one more procedure, one more round of physical discomfort that she cannot power through the way she might power through a boardroom crisis. There will be days when her confidence is replaced by a quieter, more frightening question: if her body can be changed by this, what else can be changed? Her marriage, her role in the family, her authority, her sense of safety. The show's promise to depict the hardship implies we will be invited into the parts of survival that are rarely glamorous, the emotional whiplash of good news that still comes with fear attached, the loneliness that can exist even in a crowded room of people who love you, the grief for the version of yourself who existed before the diagnosis. And yet, precisely because the writing is signaling a truthful portrayal, it also signals a different kind of triumph, one earned through repetition, patience, and the willingness to accept help. That is where Vernon Dupree becomes the emotional anchor Val Jean explicitly positions him to be. His role as Anita's steady support is not just romantic or familial, it is structural, the beam that holds a house upright when the foundation starts to tremble. In many soap stories, a partner's devotion is demonstrated with big gestures, public declarations, dramatic vows. Sweeping I will never leave moments, but the kind of support implied here is subtler and far more demanding, showing up to the unglamorous parts, staying calm when fear wants to turn into anger, learning the rhythms of a new reality without making the survivor feel like a burden. Vernon's steadiness will likely be tested by helplessness, the particular helplessness of watching someone you love suffer while you can't take it away. In a community that often equates power with the ability to fix problems, Vernon may have to confront the fact that love is sometimes only the choice to remain present when there is no solution you can purchase, no influence you can leverage, no shortcut you can negotiate. He might become the person who absorbs the household's anxiety so Anita does not have to carry all of it alone. He might also become the person who insists, quietly but firmly, that her pain is not an inconvenience and her fear is not weakness. That dynamic can deepen their bond in a way that feels earned, not by denying hardship, but by letting hardship reveal the true architecture of their partnership. It also places a spotlight on the Dupree family as a whole, because Anita's journey will inevitably affect the emotional weather of the household. When a matriarch is forced to slow down, everyone else must decide whether they will step up out of love or step in out of ambition. In Fairmont Crest, where family identity is often intertwined with reputation, Anita's private suffering may create a public ripple, subtle shifts in how others treat her, how they talk about her when she is not in the room, how they interpret the meaning of her recovery. Survival is not only biological, it is social, and that is where the show can draw tension without adding anything artificial. The tension is already there, baked into the way power and vulnerability coexist in the same living room. Parallel to Anita's physical recovery is a more psychological kind of survival story, Naomi Hamilton choosing to keep her BRCA genetic test results from Jacob Hawthorne. Even though the love between them is described as strong and resilient, the tension here is not about whether they love each other, it is about what love is allowed to look like under stress. Naomi's silence is not a random plot trick, it is the kind of silence that people choose when they are afraid of becoming defined by risk. A BRCA result is not merely information, it is a new lens through which the world can see you, and through which you begin to see yourself. It can make the future feel like it has been rewritten in invisible ink. Decisions about health, timing, family planning, prevention, and identity suddenly become urgent, even if nothing has physically happened yet. Naomi's choice to keep the result to herself suggests she may be trying to protect Jacob from fear, protect herself from pity, or protect the relationship from becoming a constant conversation about worst-case scenarios. But secrecy has a habit of turning protection into distance. The longer a secret is carried, the heavier it becomes, and the more it reshapes the carrier's behavior. Small evasions, emotional flinches, moments of distraction that have nothing to do with the immediate conversation and everything to do with what is being withheld. Jacob, even without the facts, may sense a change. In a marriage or committed partnership, a person doesn't need a confession to detect when the emotional air has shifted. Naomi may become more guarded in moments that used to be easy. She may insist on handling appointments alone, or deflect questions with a calmness that feels practiced. And because Jacob knows Naomi's strength, he might interpret her distance as determination until the pattern starts to feel like exclusion. That is where trouble can bloom, not from betrayal in the traditional sense, but from a mismatch and how each person believes love should function when life becomes frightening. Val Jean's remark that the secret could either bring them closer or split them apart captures the honest unpredictability of this kind of storyline. If Naomi tells the truth, it could become the moment where Jacob understands the depth of her fear and steps into it with her, strengthening the partnership through shared vulnerability. If she continues to withhold, it could become the moment where Jacob feels robbed of the chance to stand beside her, turning love into resentment and concern into conflict. What makes this Naomi-Jacob thread especially potent against the backdrop of Fairmont Crest is that the community's culture often rewards control and punishes uncertainty. Naomi's secret, in that environment, becomes both a shield and a trap. It shields her from the gaze of people who might reduce her to a storyline of risk, who might whisper about what it means for her future, or treat her like a ticking clock. But it traps her in isolation, forcing her to carry decisions alone that should not be carried alone. And Jacob, described as someone who knows Naomi will do what she needs to do regardless of the fallout, faces his own internal conflict, loving a woman whose strength he admires, while grappling with the possibility that her strength can sometimes become a wall he cannot climb. Their strong love does not erase the fact that strong love still has pressure points, and secrets pressed directly on the most sensitive place in any bond: trust. The first 4 months of 2026, as teased, seem poised to explore how trust isn't just about fidelity or loyalty, it's about access. Do you let the person you love have access to your fear, your uncertainty, your worst-case thoughts? Or do you protect them by keeping them outside the door, only to discover that the door eventually becomes a barrier between you? The show doesn't need to manufacture melodrama to make this explosive. The mere act of Naomi staying silent, day after day, creates a slow-motion crisis where every tender moment risks being tainted by what remains unsaid. And if a confrontation comes, it won't be meaningful because of raised voices or shock value reveals. It will be meaningful because it forces both Naomi and Jacob to define what partnership truly means when the future turns ambiguous. Taken together, these teasers outline a deliberate thematic spine for early 2026, the cost of endurance, the intimacy of care, and the danger of silence. Anita's journey demonstrates that survival is not a single victory lap, but a series of difficult and glamorous steps that change a person. Vernon's steadiness suggests that love can be a daily practice of presence rather than a dramatic declaration. Naomi's secrecy suggests that fear can make even the strongest people isolate themselves, and that isolation can threaten the very relationships that would otherwise sustain them. In a community like Fairmont Crest, where the social order is often maintained by what remains hidden, these arcs feel especially fitting because they challenge the idea that privacy is always power. Sometimes privacy is just loneliness with better lighting. Sometimes secrecy is not strategy, it is survival instinct, and survival instinct can be both understandable and destructive. If the show follows through on the tone Val Jean is describing, then the drama of the first 4 months of 2026 will not only be about what happens to these characters, but about what these experiences reveal: who becomes gentler, who becomes harder, who chooses to hold on, and who chooses to pull away when holding on feels too frightening. And perhaps that is what makes this set of promises so compelling, because underneath the glamour of soap storytelling, it points to something real. Watching characters like Anita and Naomi face these battles can be painful, but it can also be strangely comforting, a reminder that strength is not the absence of fear or pain, but the decision to move forward anyway. As a viewer, you don't just wait for the next twist. You start to recognize yourself in the quiet moments between the twists and the small choices people make when nobody is applauding them. That's the kind of drama that doesn't just entertain, it lingers, and it makes you care enough to keep watching, not for spectacle, but for the fragile, hard-won hope that people can survive what they never thought they could. What the newest revelations about Beyond the Gates make increasingly clear is that romance in Fairmont Crest is never a simple matter of chemistry or timing. It is a battlefield where history, fear, desire, and self-preservation collide, often leaving the people involved unsure whether they are choosing love or merely choosing the version of pain they know best. As the storylines unfold in early 2026, the show appears determined to explore romantic triangles not as flashy soap tropes, but as emotional stress tests that expose who these characters really are when they are forced to confront their own contradictions. At the center of this emotional storm stands Nicole Dupree, whose life is about to become a study in contrast, temptation, and the quiet terror of choice. Two men, two very different futures, and one woman who must decide whether safety or uncertainty feels more like home. Dr. Carlton Fitzgerald represents stability in its purest form. He is reliable, present, emotionally consistent, and anchored in predictability. With Carlton, Nicole does not have to guess where she stands or worry about sudden disappearances or emotional whiplash. He is the man who shows up when life is messy, who offers reassurance instead of excitement, and who provides a sense of order in a world that often spins out of control. Yet that very steadiness may also be what unsettles Nicole, because safety can feel confining when someone has lived too long amid chaos. Enter Dr. Kyle Rollins, whose presence disrupts Nicole's emotional equilibrium in an entirely different way. Kyle is intriguing, unexpected, and refreshingly new, a man who does not come with a shared past or emotional baggage already written in stone. He represents possibility rather than memory, the thrill of discovering someone without the weight of expectation. With Kyle, Nicole feels alive in a way that surprises her, as if parts of herself she thought were dormant are suddenly awakened. The tension between these two men is not merely about rivalry. It is about what kind of woman Nicole believes she is allowed to be at this stage of her life. Is she someone who chooses comfort because she has earned it, or someone who risks heartbreak because she refuses to settle for emotional complacency? The triangle forces her to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the hardest decision is not between good and bad, but between two different kinds of good, each demanding a sacrifice of its own. As Nicole navigates this emotional crossroads, the shadow of her past continues to loom large, particularly through the evolving relationship between her ex-lover Ted Richardson and Shanice Johnson. Their romance, still unfolding and deepening, serves as a constant reminder that love does not simply disappear when a relationship ends, it transforms, relocates, and often resurfaces in unexpected ways. Ted and Shanice's connection feels lighter, freer, marked by shared experiences and moments of genuine joy that contrast sharply with the heavier emotional histories elsewhere in Fairmont Crest. Together, they seem to be discovering a version of happiness that feels earned rather than fought for, built on mutual curiosity and emotional openness. Yet their happiness is not immune to interference, especially when unresolved feelings and unfinished business linger just beneath the surface. Nicole may no longer be with Ted, but his presence in her orbit, now romantically linked to someone else, adds an unspoken layer of complexity to her own romantic uncertainty. Watching Ted move forward forces Nicole to confront her own stagnation, to ask herself whether she is genuinely ready to let go of the past, or whether she is subconsciously measuring every new relationship against what once was. Ted, for his part, seems committed to this new chapter with Shanice, embracing the excitement of building something fresh. Yet his history ensures that his emotional landscape is never entirely uncomplicated.